Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all the honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Badash. Double honors and respect to the elders and to the apostles of Great Millstone. Peace and blessing to all Akim that are preaching and teaching this word with 100% truth and sincerity. And unto the men, women, and children that are listening and learning, and unto the Bayath Davadah, the elect house of David that is scattered abroad, I give you my utmost and sincere salutations. All right, this is going to be the book of Maccabees Chapter 4. The book of First Maccabees Chapter 4. And so we're going to go ahead and get into it. But first, before we do that, I'm going to read a little bit of this article here about Gorgias, who was a Syrian Seleucid general of the 2nd century BC in the service of Antiochus Epiphanes, pursuant to 1 Maccabees chapter 3 verse 38 and 2 Maccabees chapter 8 verse 9. And it says here that in his life, after Judas Maccabeus' forces defeated the Seleucid army at the Battle of Betharon, they were determined to send a stronger force against him, according to 1 Maccabees chapter 3 verse 38. When Josephus follows, all right, this is a book on the antiquities of the Jews. And basically, it was work written in Greek by historian Josephus of the 13th year of the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian, who was the last of the 12 Caesars. All right, but aside from that, who had been left, and it was, which Josephus follows, it was the governor Lysias, who had been left as regent during the absence of Antiochus in Persia, who commissioned the generals Nicanor and Gorgias, sending them with a large army to Judea. And this is the Battle of Emmaus, which the Syrians were so sure of victory that they took with them a number of merchants to whom they intended to sell the Jew prisoners as slaves. They camped at Emmaus, and Gorgias was sent thence with 5,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry and to attack Judas by night, which we're going to read here in a second. His guides being treacherous Jews, Judas had been informed of the expedition and attacked the main Syrian army at Emmaus, completely routing it. Gorgias, not finding the enemy in camp, concluded that they had retired into the mountains and went in pursuit of them, and Judas sagaciously kept his men from touching the booty, preparing them for the impending battle with Gorgias when the latter returned in the main camp. He found it in flames and the Jews ready for battle. The Syrians, seized with panic, fled into the Philistine territory. Only then did the Jews seize the rich spoils. The victory was all more striking as the force of Judas was considerably smaller in number and had not armor nor swords to their minds. So that right there just goes to show you, not having armor nor swords, and had lesser men, a smaller army, that goes to show you that the strength of Israelites, when we band together and we have faith in Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai, the few that stood against many, that's going to be the elect. The few that stand against many, because compared to the world, we're only a small handful. The majority of this world hates us. Nobody's on our side. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into the book. This is the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 4 verse 1. And he says, Then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. So, excuse me. Slack here. The men of the fortress were his guides. Verse 3, Now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army which was at Emos. All right, so again, when we read back up, it says his guides were being treacherous Jews, which means, they pretty much played Gorgias. And Judas had been informed of the expedition. Okay? Verse 4. Well, as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. Verse 5. In the mean season came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas, and when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, for said he, these fellows flee from us. Verse 6. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. Verse 7. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong, and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were expert of war. So, Gorgias, he brought with him a well-organized and well-trained army. Verse 8. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Verse 9. Excuse me. Verse 9 says, remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Verse 10. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. No. The scriptures do say that the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous runneth into it and are safe. Okay? Verse 11. That so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel. Verse 12. Then the strangers lift up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Verse 13. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. Verse 14. So they joined battle, and the heathen being discomfited, fled to the plain. Excuse me, my allergies are messing with me. So the Gentiles, the heathens, they got crushed, and they ran off. Okay? Verse 15, it says, howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gazera, which is it was a fortress in Judea, and unto the plains of Idumea. And who's Idumea? Idumea is just simply the Greek version, or the Greek pronunciation of Edom. And Azotus, which is Ashdod, and Jamnia, which is Jabna. God, let me look up Jamnia real quick here, see what that is. Jamnia was taken from the Syrians by Simon Maccabees, but the Jews did not enter into possession of the city until the time of Alexander Jannaeus. So Jamnia was, let's see, presumably Yavna in the Holy Land was a council that some claim was held. Oh gosh. Jamnia right here, which is Yavna, right here on this map. It's called the Council of Jamnia, which is see. It's the city in the central district of Israel, adjacent to the ancient site of I can't even pronounce this stuff, it's weird. Tel Yibna, a former Arab village at Tel Yibna, or however you pronounce that, but this is where it is. So I just had to look that up real quick for edification's sake. But yeah, so going back to where it was, verse 15, 1 Maccabees 4 and 15. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gazera, and unto the plains of Idumea, and Azotus, which is Ashdod, and Jamnia, and so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. This, verse 16, this done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them. Verse 7 said to the people, be not greedy of the spoils, inasmuch as there is a battle before us. So basically, Judas is telling everybody, like, look, man, don't be greedy for the plunder, for there is a battle before us. So, you know, basically, let's finish the fight first, and then we can enjoy the spoils. Verse 18. It says, and Gorgias and his host are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against your enemies, and overcome them, and after this you may boldly take the spoils. So, you know, business before pleasure, as they say. Verse 19, as Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain. Verse 20, who when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight, and were burning the tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done. 21, therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing all the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight. Excuse me. It says that they all fled into the land of strangers. Okay? In that area, let's see. Verse 23. I'm going to read verse 22 in the Apocrypha, in the New Revised Standard Version Bible that I have right here. This is what it looks like. Oh, shut up, Salakia. Let me put that right there. Sorry. So it says here in 1 Maccabees 4 and 22. Let me see. I'm going to knock the camera there. There we go. 1 Maccabees 4, chapter 4, verse 22 in the New Revised Standard Version, and it says, they all fled into the land of the Philistines. In verse 22 in the KJV, they fled everyone to the land of strangers. All right, so this was basically, the Philistines, of course, are Hamites. Verse 23, so they fled into the Hamite territory. Verse 23, and says, then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea, and great riches. Verse 24, after this, in fact, let's look up blue silk and purple of the sea real quick. See if I can find it. So basically, sea blue and purple Kanchipuram silk sari with handwork blouse. So basically, you know, goodly apparel. Let's go to images. This is what basically what it looked like. Well, I'm not going to say this is exactly what it looked like, but you get the idea. So basically, goodly apparel, nice clothing, all right, and great riches. And it says here, verse 24, after this they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised the Lord in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Verse 25, thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened. So we're going to read a little bit about Lysias, who was a Syrian counselor. He was a 2nd century BC general and governor of Syria under the Seleucid Empire. And it says that the Seleucid Empire of the 2nd century BC was huge. It possessed 2 heartlands, the capital of Antioch in Syria and a secondary capital at Babylon in Mesopotamia. Seleucid rulers had to aggressively remind their client rulers of their loyalty, lest the client rulers drift towards independence, as happened with various sub-kingdoms over time. King Antiochus IV Epiphanes left Antioch around the summer of 165 BC on an expedition to the eastern satrapies. So a satrap was a governor of the provinces of the ancient Median and Persian empires, and in several of their successors, such as in the Sasanian Empire and the Hellenistic empires. A satrapy is the territory governed by a satrap, otherwise a governor. He would see to affairs in Babylonia, dismiss corrupt or overly independent officials, and attempt to exercise control over the drifting Persian provinces. We're right here. To what would become the Parthian Empire, also known as the Arsacid Empire, was a major Iranian political and cultural power centered in ancient Iran from 247 BC to 224 AD. Its latter name comes from its founder, Arsaces I, who led the Parni tribe in conquering the region of Parthia in Iran's northeast. Antiochus IV left Lysias in charge of the government in the western half of the empire as regent. Lysias also took guardianship of Antiochus' son, who is Antiochus V Eupator, who continued to be raised in Antioch. Antiochus then went east with loyal Greek army into Babylonia and Persia to collect the revenues which were not coming in satisfactorily. Lysias is largely remembered due to his involvement in the Maccabean revolt, as the records of this would be preserved in a way that Seleucid records were not, including the books of 1st Maccabees and 2nd Maccabees, aiming to restore order in the rest of the province of Judea. Lysias sent an expedition of troops under Ptolemy, son of Doramenus, Nicanor, and Gorgias to find and fight the Maccabee rebels. Using trickery and marching by night, Judas Maccabeus defeated a contingent of the Seleucid force after the Seleucids had separated their army at the Battle of Emmons, which was in 165 BC. Lysias himself led a second and larger expedition in 164 BC. And Lysias' army and the Maccabees fought at the Battle of Bethsur, but it ended either inconclusively or with a minor Maccabee victory. However, news of Antiochus IV's death in Persia made it back to Judea shortly after Bethsur, and Lysias had to immediately return to Antioch to manage the government transition to ensure that the other Seleucid rivals did not seize leadership in his absence. So Judas took the opportunity to triumphantly conquer the Jewish holy city of Jerusalem and to purify the second temple. Well, yeah, because it was filled with those heathens. Purify the second temple, citing the Battle of Bethsur as the reason that the Seleucids left. All right, now we're going to get into this part. We left off at 1 Maccabees Chapter 4, verse 26, and I'll read it again. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what happened. 27, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. Verse 28, the next year, therefore, following, Lysias gathered together 3,000 choice men of foot. So 60, meaning 60,000 choice men of foot, and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So 60,000 men on foot and an extra 5,000 horsemen, so 65,000 men total. 29, so they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsur, and Judas met with them 10,000 men. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers. Gavest the host of strangers, into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Verse 31, shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Verse 32, make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Okay. Like again, the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous runneth into it and is safe. Okay. Now going back to, let's see here. Okay, continuing on. It says, verse 33, cast them down with the sword of them that love thee. Let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. 34, so they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas' soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again into Judea. And we just read that here in this article on Wikipedia here. If I can go back and look for it here. Let's see. Yeah, it says right here, Lysias himself led a second and larger expedition in 164 BC. Lysias' army and the Maccabees fought at the Battle of Bethsur. It was fought between the Maccabees, led by Judas, and the Seleucid Greek army led by Regent Lysias and Lysias, 164 BC. According to the book of Maccabees, the rebels won the battle, although how significant this victory really was is disputed, but I'm not going to go too deep into that. Now going here in verse 36, then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Dedicate the sanctuary. Okay. Dedicate the sanctuary, verse 37. Upon this all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burnt up, and shrubs growing in the courts, as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down, verse 9, they rent their clothes, and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads. Okay, so they were greatly displeased at how the holy temple was desecrated, because, the heathens had dwelt there. Okay, let me see something here. Just bear with me for a moment. Excuse me. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Bear with me for a second. All right. Never mind. I was just looking at something to make sure that I wasn't missing something. All right. So this is going to be verse 38, or verse 40. And fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Verse 41, then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. 42, so he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law. Verse 43, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned. Verse 45, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down. 46, and they laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. All right. Verse 47, then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former. Excuse me. And it says, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hollowed the courts. So he's basically rebuilding everything as it once was. Making everything as it was before. It was defiled before the heathen. It was defiled by the heathens. Verse 49, they also made new holy vessels. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings, and of incense and the table. 50, and upon the altar they burnt incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. 51, furthermore they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. 52, now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is Caslow, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Okay, let me see if I can find a precept here. Bear with me a moment, Salakia. Now, let's see here. Going back to verse 9 where it says, remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. This is going to be, let's see here. Exodus. Exodus chapter 14. Salakia, let me get there. Exodus chapter 14. Verse 21. And it says, and Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. 22. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And in verse 20, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. 24. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians with a pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. So the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. Verse 26, and the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, and let the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled again against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned to cover the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came to the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on the left. So, again, man, just like how, when there's a few that stand against many, the scriptures say, when two or more are gathered, I am in the midst. Yahweh Shem Yahushai is always in the midst of his people, and he will not do iniquity. Right? So, Yahweh Shem Yahushai he's always been on Israel's side. It's just that, we always be going off and doing dumb shit all the time, which causes the Most High to punish us. Okay? And and this is the thing, man, excuse me. If Israel would realize this, if they would just subdue their own understanding and humble themselves and listen to the instruction and guidance of the Lord, we wouldn't be having all these problems. But it's really, it's really something, man. You just can't, like I said, throughout all these years, throughout history, Yahweh, whenever Israel rose up, it was because Yahweh Shem Yahushai was with us. He had that mercy. Going back to the covenant with our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Genesis 17. Let me get it. Genesis chapter 17. Genesis 17, verse 1. And it says, and when Abraham was 90 years old and 9, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the almighty power. Walk before me and be thou perfect. Verse 2, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and the Most High talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. And the name Abram just means exalted father, but when he was surnamed Abraham, it means the father of many nations. Verse 5, Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee, and I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee, and in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a power unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their power. And Yahweh said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant therefore, and thy seed after thee in their generations. Okay? And as we read further on in this chapter, it'll tell you that, let's see, I left off at verse 51. I left off at verse 50, sorry. So, 1 Maccabees 4 and 50. And upon the altar they burnt incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. 51. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. 52. Now on the 5 and 25th day of the 9th month, which is Caslow, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. 54. Look at what time and what day the heathen hath profaned it, even in that was a dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days. And that's talking about the Feast of Dedication, otherwise known as Hanukkah. Excuse me. In fact, let's take a look at it. The Feast of Dedication. Excuse me. Okay, it says here in the overview, the Feast of Dedication, also known as Hanukkah, was a festival of lights, a holiday commemorating the rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem after it was reclaimed from the Seleucid Empire in the 2nd century BCE. It is observed for 8 days, traditionally in late November or December. This holy day marks the symbolic cleansing and rededication of the Second Temple after it was defiled by the Seleucids. Okay? And the tradition of lighting the menorah it's not 9-branch candle burn, it's 7. During the Feast of Dedication is a central part of the celebration with 1 candle lit each night until all 8 are lit. It's weird. It's celebrated with joy and gladness, including family gatherings, foods, and the significance in John 10 and 22, where Yahweh Shai is said to have been present in Jerusalem during the festival. So it's commemorating the rededication of the Second Temple that was rebuilt by the Maccabees. Alright, going to verse 56. And I'm going to read it again. Verse 56, 1 Maccabees 4 and 56. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed the hanged doors upon them. Verse 58, thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Okay? So, they had pretty much, rebuilt the temple, cleansed out all the profane things which had defiled the temple, and the Seleucids had occupied it. Verse 59, moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 5 and 20th day of the month of Caslow, with mirth and gladness. At that time also they build up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. Okay? Once again, Idumea is the Greek pronunciation for Edom. So the Seleucids were Edomites. And who's in the land, and who's in the Holy Land right now? Edomites. More specifically, the elites of the Edomites, which are the Amalek, who is the grandson of Esau Edom. The Amalekites, the black hats, which say they are Jews and which are not. Now, let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it on First Maccabees Chapter 4. That's all I had for this. Lord willing, was edifying. I know I was late on this. I just had to go back and look at some things to make sure that I was on point. I slack on that for taking so long. But nonetheless, I pray that it was edifying to the elect and to the few sincere believers and listeners. Okay? Like I said, the more you look at the history, the more you'll understand. The more you look at the worldly history, the more you'll understand the mystery of the scriptures. Because the history is part of the scriptures, it's just encoded, it's in parables. Alright, so going back to Lysias here, this is, like I said, he was a Syrian a governor, and of course Gorgias was a general. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You can read the rest for yourself when you get a chance, and a little bit on this right here. I'm gonna read a little bit here. Let's see. As we read later down, okay, so as we get later down here, it says, back at Antioch, Lysias assumed the office of regent, which is basically a temporary governor, because the main ruler was out of country or was inactive, but he was not there. I'm talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. For the entire empire, now on behalf of King Antiochus V, Eupator, who was still a child, Lysias apparently spent 163 BC consolidating power in Antioch. Continuing unrest in Judea meant that he assembled another army and marched on Judea again in 162 BC. Man, Lysias was one relentless motherfucker. His second expedition was more successful. His army was quite large and included war elephants, one of the most feared and iconic Seleucid army elements. At the Battle of Beth Zachariah, Lysias won a crushing victory over the Maccabees. Judas's brother Eleazar was slain, and Judas retreated to the safety of the mountains, abandoning Jerusalem. Lysias moved in to besiege Jerusalem afterward. However, Lysias was on a time limit of sorts. Too long away from the capital could still lead to political trouble from internal rivals. in particular an ambitious leader called Philip, implausibly claimed that Antiochus IV had appointed him regent on his deathbed. Lysias negotiated an end to the rebellion and brought peace to Judea for a time so that he could return to face Philip. Salakia, hold on. To face Philip, right here. To face Philip. See, the historian Josephus wrote that Philip was caught and executed, but it is impossible to know if he had a source saying this or was merely making an educated guess. Lysias tore down a wall in Jerusalem, presumably to reduce its future ability to rebel. He confirmed the repeal of the anti-Jew decrees that had happened under Antiochus IV, reducing religious tensions. He also ordered the execution of despised high priest Menelaus. He was a priest in Jerusalem from 172 BC to 161 BC. He was high priest at the beginning of the Maccabean revolt. He was the successor of Jason, the brother of Onias III, and possibly appointed a replacement in Alcimus. Alright, and that was high priest of Israel for 3 years from 162 to 159 BCE. He was a moderate Hellenizer who favored the ruling government of the Seleucid Empire and opposed the Maccabean revolt, which was in progress at the time. You can read about that in 2nd Maccabees and 1st Maccabees. Let's see. And it says here, well, like I'm just skimming over some things, but we'll get more into in the future lessons. There's still more on this guy Lysias, but other than that, just to close out, once again, hopefully this was an edifying lesson. And with closing, I'd like to give all the honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahawashi, Bahashem Chakodash. Double honors and respect to the elders and to the apostles of the great millstone. Peace and blessing to all Akim that are preaching and teaching this word with 100% truth and sincerity. And unto the men, women, and children that are listening and learning, and unto the Bayat, the elect house of David that is scattered abroad, I give you my utmost and sincere salutations. See you in the next lesson, Lord. Kwame Yasharala, Wa Ababa Bal, Shalom, Barakatam.